Good afternoon. In those two simple words, your mind has already begun to make assumptions about me, about the way that I speak, the language I speak, my proficiency in the language, maybe if I have an accent, how I said it. Language is often underrated in how important it is to communicate with one another. Thus is the issue that comes up when referring to people by their preferred names and pronouns. Oftentimes, we get caught up in the grammar of everything, assuming that the English language was structured in a way in which they will always be singular, will always be plural. However, within the LGBTQIA+ community, there is even discord about that, about whether or not non-binary people exist within trans people, within cisgendered, or within something else entirely. So in order to communicate efficiently and effectively, let's lay down some baseline definitions. Firstly, queer. For a long time, queer was used as a slur towards the LGBTQIA+ community, a way to make someone feel othered, to feel like they didn't belong. However, we have accepted the use of the word queer as a part of our community. Queer has become a word which we use to identify those who don't wish to claim a specific label but still feel part of our community. Queer has become a word of welcome, a word of unity. Next, a term that you may have heard in relation to gender: cis, non-binary, and trans. Cisgendered, you may know, is those who identify with people who identify with the gender that they were assigned at birth, the sex they were assigned at birth. I stand before you as a cisgendered man. I identify as male. My sex assigned at birth was male. I am cisgendered. Thusly, trans are those who identify with the opposite gender of the sex that they were assigned at birth. So, what is non-binary? Without knowing it, we've actually identified the two sides of the binary, cisgendered and transgender. Non-binary is the spectrum of gender that lies in between the two. For this talk, while we recognize that non-binary people may have a variety of identities, we recognize that they prefer the pronoun of the singular they. Heteronormative. So we've discussed one binary, cisgender and transgender. Look at the rest of the graph. That is what heteronormativity is. People exist as either or. You are either gay or straight. You are either male or female. You present masculinely, you present femininely. Because if you exist outside of these binaries, you are considered the other. The other are the people who exist in this ether, this not necessarily straight, not necessarily gay, not male, not female. It is an ether. It is an outset. You are an outcast. So, now that we have some baseline definitions, let's think about this more practically. Imagine that you were set up on a blind date by a friend. You know, you get to learn a little bit about your date. You probably know their name, what they do, things of that nature. So when you sit down to your date, you assume that they probably have learned a little bit about you as well. So when you sit down, and in my instance, I'm going to use Vincent. It's a name that I get called a lot. Well, I'm not sure where all the extra letters come from, it's close enough. It's normally a very easy fix. Say, actually, my name is Victor. But in this case, your date goes, right, sorry, whatever. Anyway, so Vincent. The date continues. No matter how many times you try to subtly or not so subtly explain that that isn't your name, it's used over and over and over again. And at one point, they say to you, you know what, it doesn't really matter that much. You know who I'm talking to you. It's not that big of a deal. And it isn't for them. But they're not the one experiencing this disrespect. You are. you're constantly being told that whatever you're referred to as doesn't necessarily matter. You get the gist of it. This is an experience that non-binary people have every single day, multiple times a day, by multiple different people. And unfortunately, they can't choose to not go on a second date. They have to live with these people, whether it's their bosses, coworkers, peers, teachers, students, and in many instances, their own family. Hopefully now we can begin to understand where people may be coming from. A study done at Teesside University found that individuals who experienced felt stigma, like when you're referred to by not your preferred names or pronouns, can lead to a higher risk for suicide. And when it comes to the relationship between a doctor and patient, if a patient is not referred to by their preferred name or pronoun, it can disintegrate the trust between patient and doctor, thus leading to the patient not getting the treatment that they need, which can be seen as a form of self-harm. But in many cases, people aren't trying to be disrespectful. It's a matter of grammar. It's a matter of English. It's what you've grown up with. Miriam Margolyes, who you may know better as Professor Sprout, the herbology professor from Harry Potter, went on to the Graham Norton Show, a popular UK late-night talk show. And she expressed that she felt very similarly. She could never understand how to refer to somebody as they or them because it was a matter of grammar. She's always been very keen on the grammar of it all. Until she spoke with Zoe Terakis, an Australian actor who said something very prominent to her. They said, "What does it matter to you if you call somebody they instead of he or she? If it makes them happy, why does it matter to you?" Could it really be that simple? Is it that straightforward? A little bit of empathy, a little bit of compassion, a little bit of respect. How far can it go? For me, not very far. I work in journalism. I have a rule book that I have to follow. It is English. It's grammar. It doesn't change just because I want somebody to feel happy. But what does the rule book say? They, them, their is acceptable in limited cases as a singular and/or gender-neutral pronoun. The singular reflexive themself is acceptable if needed in constructions involving people who identify as neither male nor female. It says the exact same thing in the Oxford English Dictionary, in Chicago Style, Merriam-Webster, and of course the Associated Press Style book. As late as 2019, all of the style guides have accepted the use of the singular they when referring to someone whose gender identity is neither male nor female. But 2019 wasn't that long ago. They has been plural for so much longer. Of course, the oldest use of the singular they was only 673 years ago. In a story known as William and the Werewolf, it says, "Each man hurried till they drew near to William and his lover lying there." Each man hurried till they drew near, till he drew near. It's a singular. It's being used as one. So, what now? We know that it's used in English. We know that it's grammatically correct, but why? Why is it so important? From my own personal testimony, as well as speaking to those who identify as non-binary, there is still a feeling of othering, because people can't understand that language can change. If I were to flash back to the 18th century, and I were to go up to a friend of mine and say, "How are you doing?" I would get laughed out of the town. I would be considered an idiot, a fool, ridiculous, because you was only ever used as a plural pronoun. The only singular pronouns were thou, thy, and thee. But if I were to go up to my friend today and say, "How are thou?" I would get a chuckle. I would get a laugh. I would be called ridiculous or playing a bit. Our language is constantly changing and adapting, becoming more inclusive, becoming more acceptable. It's not impossible to change grammar. It's done it many, many, many times before. So people are feeling othered because the language shouldn't change, can't change. For whatever the reason may be, there's still a feeling of othering. And this othering affects anybody. As shown in a study done by Jessica King in a feeling of exclusivity, heterosexuals, straight people, 4.2% attempted suicide. 17.06 had depressive episodes. 25.83% binge drank as a coping mechanism. For those who identify as lesbian or gay, homosexual, 19.6% attempted suicide. 35.88 had depressive episodes. 26.91 binge drank to cope. These two groups of people experienced hardships, but they exist within our heteronormative society. They are either gay or straight. For those who exist outside of the heteronormative expectations, the statistics were significantly higher. 22.3% attempted suicide. 40.38 had depressive episodes, and 32.55% binge drank to cope with their exclusionary feelings. In situations where LGBTQIA+ people are in unaccepting experiences, these are 20% more likely. I'm not going to stand here and act like I've had a profound thought, like I've changed the world with this talk, that I've changed a single mind. What I hope for after today is when you're presented with an issue of language in your life, that you remember me standing here on my red circle soapbox, that you think of the two words, good afternoon, and that you remember me, and that you remember that language is the key to inclusivity, empathy, and a better world that we can make together. Thank you.